That's 122b. And then yesterday we did the Mishnah of this, the new parak. The parak is called Kol HaKelim. There's a machlekes if it's supposed to say Kol HaKelim Nitalim, Kol HaKelim HaNitalim. The difference is if all vessels are permissible to be moved on Shabbos, or all vessels that are permissible to be moved, and that means there's a limitation there, you can move the doors as well. Now, if you notice that first line of the Mishnah, Kol HaKelim HaNitalim b'Shabbos would also say Imam, you can also move the doors of those vessels. There's some sort of box or case that has a door that says Afal Pishin Esparku, even though the door came off. Now there's a discussion if the next word is in there, b'Shabbos, even if the door came off on Shabbos. Now on one hand, if the door came off on Shabbos, then there's an advantage to that because the door used to be attached to the box. While it was attached to the box, I'm allowed to move the door. I can open the door. It's a little like a chest, let's say. It has a cover. So when Shabbos came in, that cover was functioning and the cover wasn't muktzah. So now that it came off on Shabbos, it's still not muktzah because it wasn't muktzah when Shabbos came in. On the other hand, it could be that if it came off before Shabbos, could be it was already muktzah before Shabbos, and that would be worse. And I shouldn't be allowed to use it because when Shabbos came in, it was already detached from the box. Maybe it was considered muktzah. But if you read the Mishnah like this, the Mishnah says all vessels that or which are moved on Shabbos, the doors together with them, even though they came apart on Shabbos. Even though they came apart on Shabbos, I'm still allowed to move it. Let's jump now to the Gemara. That's where we'll start. We'll start from the Gemara. The Gemara says, Kol HaKelim Nitalim, all the vessels are movable on Shabbos, they're not muktzah. Afal Pishin Esparku b'Shabbos, even though they came off on Shabbos, even though the lids came off on Shabbos. Nevertheless, you're allowed to move those lids. And it doesn't have to tell me that if they came off on the weekday. Now, that's exactly the opposite of the way we were just explaining. In other words, the chiddush is that even though it broke on Shabbos, you're still allowed to move it. That's not a chiddush. The chiddush would be even if it broke on the weekday, you're still allowed to use it. The Gemara says, Adarabba, b'Shabbos muchanim al gabi aviyam. I think that's how you pronounce it. On Shabbos, they're not considered muktzah because the father, the box, the base is not muktzah, so the lid is also not muktzah. The door. B'chol ein muchanim al gabi aviyam, but on the weekday they were already broken. Let's try to explain this again, just for clarification. If I have a box that the lid came off, so the box is still usable, but the door, that lid, may be considered not usable. However, if it came off on Shabbos, then logic would tell me that because when Shabbos came in, it was still usable, so it didn't become muktzah. The problem is that the Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah says, even though it came off on Shabbos, and that's a big problem, the even though. Even though it came off on Shabbos, it's not muktzah. The Gemara asks on the even though. Even though it came off on Shabbos, it's not muktzah. And you don't have to tell me, all the more so if it came off in the weekday that it's not muktzah. The Gemara says it's just the opposite. If it came off on Shabbos, that's a reason why it's not muktzah, because when Shabbos came in, it was still functioning. But if it came off in the weekday, maybe it's muktzah. So what's the even though it came off on Shabbos, it's not muktzah. So Amar Abaya. Abaya says, Hachi Kamar. Read it like this. Kol HaKelim Nitalim b'Shabbos v'dal seseim imayim. All vessels could be moved on Shabbos, they're not muktzah. And the lids of the doors together with them could be moved. Afal Pishin Esparku b'chol, even though they came off on the weekday, Nitalim b'Shabbos. They can be moved on Shabbos. So the chiddush isn't, the Afal Pi is not going on that it broke, the door broke off on Shabbos. The Afal Pi is even though it broke. It's not the even though it broke on Shabbos. Even though it broke, it could still be moved. When did it break? It broke on the weekday. You can still move it on Shabbos, even though it's broken. Okay. The question is what to do with the word in parentheses. That's the problem there. If you don't have that word at all, then that's the way the Gemara concludes. Afal pishin esparko. Even though it broke, you can still move it on Shabbos. If you do have the word, then you understand the Gemara's question. If you don't have it, then you understand the Gemara's answer. The question is which, I don't know. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan, it was taught in the Brisa. Dela shel shida v'shel teva shel migdal. These are different types of boxes. I don't know, a chest, a box, some sort of little cabinet. Neitlin avalei machzirin. You can take the door off these chests and cabinets, but you can't put it back on. Shalul shel tarnagaylam, if it's a chicken coop, lei neitlin lei machzirin. You can't take it off, and you can't put it. You cannot take it off, and you cannot put it back on. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to explain the case of the chicken coop, but it's going to leave us with a question with the case of the box. Where it says, Bishlem shalil shel tarnagaylim. Granted, it's good. The case of the chicken coop where you can't remove or replace the door. Because since the chicken coop is attached to the ground, it's directly on the ground, you don't move it. So yesh binyan bekarka, yesh stir bekarka. That's considered construction. And everyone agrees there's construction for something that's on the ground. So whether you take off the door or put the door back on, that's considered construction. See, it should work hand in hand. If it's considered building, then taking it apart is considered destroying. But when it comes to those boxes and cabinets and chests, my kasavar, what is the opinion of the Brisa? That's the machlekes. Is there a concept of binyan b'kelim? You putting together, assembling some sort of keli. Put the pieces together. It's a movable object. Is that considered binyan? Putting this door onto this chest, is that considered construction? It's not attached to the ground. It's a little chest. So that's a machlekes. I think machlekes beisil b'shameh. But if let's say you hold one opinion. So let's say you take the opinion of yesh binyan b'kelim. If that's the case, because of yesh stira b'kelim, you can't take the door off either. If you only can't put the door back on, you can't take the door off because it works hand in hand. If the ain't stira b'kelim, and if there's no destroying by vessels, so then ain't binyan b'kelim, then there's no problem of building either. Then you should be allowed to put the door back on. It's a problem. It's inconsistent. The rule about taking the door off a chest, you're allowed to take it off, but you can't put it back on. That's inconsistent. Amar Abaya says, "Leilam k'sav yesh binyan b'kelim." Really, there is such a concept of binyan b'kelim. V'yesh stir b'kelim. V'shenitlu kamar. Abaya turns the Brisa he lessens the chiddush over here. He says, originally it says noitlin avalei machzir, and Abaya says it doesn't say noitlin. What it says is nitlu. If it happened to be removed, you're not allowed to put it back on. But you're not allowed to take it off. You're not allowed to put it back on either. You're not allowed to take it off. So how did it get off? Well, it got off somehow. It fell off. But there's no question, and there's also very little chiddush. That's the problem. The question was, there's too big of a chiddush. So Abaya says, no, it's not such a chiddush. Okay. Amalei Rava is bothered by Abaya's answer. He says, state shuvas b'davar. I have two retorts for Abaya's answer. It says, Chada, one of them is the neitlin ktani. That's not what it says. It said neitlin, that you're allowed to remove it. It didn't say it was removed or it happened to be removed. It said you can remove it. Void, my aval loy machzirin. But you can't return it. What is the but you can't return it if you never took it off? Well, it fell off. But if you're not allowed to take it off, then what does it mean? But you can't return it. If you could take it off, but you can't return it, so then good. But if it fell off, but you can't return it, there was no first clause to that phrase. Rava says, there's no problem of construction by utensils. What's the problem here? The problem over here is that you may put it back in a way where it won't come out again. If you do that, then you're not going into the malacha of binyan bekalim, of binyan or stira. Now you're going into a malacha of makeh bepatish. Makeh bepatish doesn't apply. It sounds like it applies to construction, but it really doesn't apply it's not specifically about construction. Makeh bepatish could be any finishing of a product. Could be pulling a thread out of the suit that the tailor leaves in, the tags sometimes. The makeh bepatish could apply to any finishing of a product. So over here, the person may be considered that he's fixing the box in a way that he's completing it, and he's finishing that product. He's finishing the box. That's considered makeh bepatish. Nothing to do with binyan. He's finishing the product.
Rabbi Smith, is this discussion what's behind the controversy about opening pop-top cans on Shabbat?
That's interesting. I think that had to do with making a Eily by, if you make a new hole, then that can be considered making a Eily. That was slightly different. I don't know if that's a makeh bepatish. Does that go on the makeh bepatish? That I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was makeh bepatish. I thought that was making a Eily because the cap that they put on when you open up any sort of can, you're referring to a can like a soda can. When you open the can, you make a hole inside the thing that you see the top rim is placed on, and then you open that. I think that had an issue of making a Eily, making that opening. I'm not sure if that had to do with makeh bepatish. I'm not sure. Do you remember specifically that it did?
No. I was referring to the previous discussion that we've had this morning about boneh and soter.
Oh. I have to think about that. I have to go back into it. I have to look it up. That came in when we were talking about opening the megufa, which was another sort of opening that was done in a barrel. I have to go back into it. Okay. So we did over here, binyan bekalim. Okay. Machlekas Abai and Rabbi, what does everyone hold? If yesh binyan bekalim, but the Gemara did tell us that it works hand in hand. If there's binyan, then there's stira. We mentioned once that Rabbi Hirschsprung tested this fellow on Masechta Shabbos. So he asked him this interesting question about, prove it to me that a dog eats shalosh sudas, and he wanted from that fire how many sudas you're allowed to save. He says you're allowed to save for you and for your animal. It's a ryan. So he had another question that he asked him that was, where do you see that you're not allowed to eat cheese on Shabbos? So the person couldn't figure it out, but then he told him the answer. He said, because if Tosfos holds that making cheese is binyan, because the way you build it up, you take the cheesecloth and you turn it, you form it. So anything that has binyan has stira. So it was more of a joke than, but you're saying if it's building, then it has destroying. So you shouldn't be allowed to eat it. Okay. Neitel adam kornas chulu. You're allowed to eat cheese on Shabbos. we said that a person can take a hammer to break nuts on Shabbos. Now, the hammer is a tool that's used for construction. It's a keli shemalach le'isr. It's a vessel that's used for prohibited work, usually, right? But you can use it for a permitted work. Amar Rav Yehuda minimizes the statement. He says, "Kornish shel hagoyzim lefatzeh bayas hagoyzim, aval shel nefachim lai." Kornish over here would probably be translated as a mallet, a soft hammer. A mallet that's used to break walnuts, that you're allowed to use to break walnuts. But the carpenter's hammer, no. A nafach would be a blacksmith's hammer. That you wouldn't be allowed to use. Very little chiddush now, according to Rabbi Yehuda. He's saying you're allowed to open a nut, and the hammer is a nut cracker. He must hold that if this type of utensil is for prohibited work, you're not allowed to use it, even for permitted work. Amalei Rabba says to Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is the student of Rav and Shmuel. Rabba says to him, Elameata, if that's the case, that's the way you want to learn the Mishnah, that a keli shemalach delis, or a utensil that's made for prohibited work, is not allowed to be used for permitted work, even for permitted work. So read the rest of the Mishnah. Let's see if it's going to fit. Seifa diktani, in the end of the Mishnah it says, Vesarachas, vesamalges. Malges is like mazleg. A rachas, which we said was a shovel, which is used for winnowing. It's probably a large shovel. And this pitchfork. Lasei salav lakatan. You're allowed to use it to feed a child. It says rachas umalges mi miachtele lakatan. Is there such a thing that there's a shovel and a winnowing shovel and a pitchfork that's made for a child to use? It's impossible. See, when it came to the hammer, there's two types of hammers. There's the mallet, the soft mallet that's used for cracking nuts, and then there's a hammer for a blacksmith. So there's two types, and you're telling me which one it is. You said it's the mallet you're allowed to use, but as you read the Mishnah down, you see that it doesn't fit, because those are utensils that are specifically for work. There is no winnowing shovel. It's not referring, a spoon is called a kaf, not a rachas. Rachas is a huge instrument. Now, yes, you're allowed to use it if you want to put, I don't know, whatever you're going to do, some interesting situation, you're going to put food on it for the child. Okay. Elama Rabbi says we need a new pshat over here. You're allowed to use a hammer from a blacksmith to crack nuts, even though a blacksmith work is clearly asur. But you're allowed to use this keli, shemalach de le'isr, you're allowed to use it for heter. Kasavar, because he holds, the Mishnah holds, an instrument that's made for prohibited work is allowed to be used. L'tzerech gufay means for its own work in a permissible way. Right? Let's say a hammer is an example, but let's say a scissors. Scissors is used for cutting paper. That is a problem to cut paper. You're allowed to use it to cut, I don't know, some sort of matzah, I don't know, to open something that you're allowed to open. Things, the packages that gets thrown away, that you're allowed to open. You're allowed to use the scissors for that. So for keli shemalachta le'isr, according to this, keli shemalachta le'isr l'tzerich gufay, you're allowed to use it for things that are permissible. And similar type things. Okay. Dafim is not halacha. Esvei Abaya l'Rabba. Abaya asked Rabba a question. Rabba is the one that says, Keli shemalachta le'isr is mutar l'tzerich gufay. Meducha, this is some sort of grinder. Im yesh bashum, if it has garlic in it, you're allowed to move the grinder. Then you can move it. Maybe that's more what it is. It's like a mortar and pestle, like Dr. Stein's picture. If it has the garlic in it, it's, you crush it like with the pestle. So then you're allowed to move it. You're not allowed to move it. Now, why would you be moving it? Well, you probably want to move it because you want to sit on it, let's say. Maybe it's a little larger than that thing, the picture. You're going to use it for some purpose that would be permissible. Maybe you turn it over and you sit on it. So the question is, according to Rabbi, that you're allowed to move an item, a utensil that has a prohibited use, you're allowed to use it for a permitted use. Then why only if there's garlic in it? Why are you allowed to move it if there's garlic in it? You say, well, the garlic is the permissible thing, and I'm allowed to move it because there's garlic in it. It makes the whole thing permissible to move. I have a better reason, because it's l'tzarech gufay. I'm using it to sit on it. Amalei, so this is such a strong question. Rabbi answers it. Hamani Reb Nechemya. This goes according to a different opinion. This goes according to Reb Nechemya. He holds that you can only move a vessel, a utensil, only for its exact, precise function. You can't move it to do something else. Okay, Esvei, another question. We'll see these two questions sort of go hand in hand. We'll have it again. Again, this is using a pestle. This would be a large grinding stick, much larger. Shami says you can't cut meat on top of the pestle. The pestle is like usually a round grinding thing. But let's say there was one that was very large, maybe it wasn't round, and you could use it to chop on top of it, maybe it would be like a cutting board. Not sure exactly, but you can't use it according to Beis Shammai to cut meat on it, and Beis Hillel says you are allowed to use it. B'shavan, but they both agree, Shem kitzav alav basar, that once you already did that, according to Beis Hillel, permissibly. But now, now you can't move it. Why did Beis Hillel allow you to cut the meat on it? It's Simchas Yom Tov. It was special dispensation for the enjoyment of Yom Tov. You should be allowed to cut the meat. But this, you really can't move because it's made for you using, you use this to crush the spices that are used in the tanning or whatever. Why can't you move it? Maybe you're moving it for a different purpose. You want to sit on it or something. So, Savala Shnei Lek Reb Nechemya. Rabbi thought that, I'll give the same answer that I gave before. Reb Nechemya holds that you're not allowed to move a utensil. You can only move a utensil for its original purpose. But given the Shamal the Amar Rav Chinena Bar Shalmei Mishmei de Rav, but then he heard that Rav Chinena Bar Shalmei said in the name of Rav, Hakol Moedim, that everyone agrees. V'sichei Zairei Umezurei. It's machlokes here what these are, but sichei would be pegs or pins that are used to hold up silk, and when they do carding, which is they thin out the fibers. They take two brushes and they go like this to make the fibers thin, straight. That's before they spin it. So they have to make the fibers straight. So they push it onto a board that has these pegs on it, and then they comb it along that board, and it makes the fibers straight. So that could be those pegs. Zaire would be some sort of press, either a board that's used to straighten things, or it's some sort of press. A Missouri is some sort of rods that are used also either in the weaving process or they're used in the dyeing when you dye it. It's some sort of tool. Now these tools, whatever they are, whatever these tools are, kivan the kapar alayu, because he's very particular about these things. He needs those pins to be straight. He needs the board not to be warped. So then, miyachad lumakim, he designates a place for them. Zachnam miyachad lumakim. Also over here, by the mortar and pestle, that he wants to cut the meat on it, he designates a place. So we have a new sort of criteria for muktzah, that there are certain things that you don't want them to get ruined. And so therefore you designate a place for them. That means that I'm not going to use this for anything over Shabbos or Yom Tov. In this case, it was Yom Tov. By the cutting of the meat. So you're not going to use it for anything. So it's like, it was muktzah. Muktzah is really in the mind. It's designated in the mind that you're not going to use it. Set aside. That's what it is. Muktzah is set aside in your mind that you're not going to use it. Why is it set aside? Because you don't want it to get ruined. You only use it for that function. Today, this would be like a computer, a laptop or something, or a phone. You don't use it for any other purpose. You don't say, well, I'm going to use it to hold my coffee. It's going to be putting it down on the table. I don't have a dish. I'm going to. You don't use any of these devices for that. It's set aside. It's only used for those things. Yes, it's a keli shemalachte leiser, but there is no use of it leheter. Even if you say I'm going to use it leheter. See, a screwdriver, you use it for to open because you lost the key or something. So you can use the screwdriver. That's just the key. It's not only for building. Or the hammer, or the scissors. Those used for other things. But this is an item that you only use for that, Okay. Itmar, there's a statement. When we mentioned in the Mishnah that you can crack a nut with a hammer, so Rabbi Chia Barabba says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that was a goldsmith's hammer. That's what you're allowed to use. Rav Shaman Barabba Amar, Kunashel Besamim Shnino. It's a spice. It's a hammer that's used for spices. Now, which one is more delicate? So Mandamar de Besamim, Kolshken de Zahavim. The spices one is more delicate. If you're allowed to use a spice one, then for sure you're allowed to use a gold one. Even though the gold one sounds very expensive, and you have to bang the gold to make it thin, and then they would make it into plates and all of that. But nevertheless, if the hammer gets ruined a little bit, so then it would make a hole in the gold because they didn't have the metals weren't as strong. They didn't have like the steel or whatever. So you would have to flatten out the top of the hammer before you use it. But that's not a problem because you could always flatten it out. Then, so if you can use the spice one, then for sure you can use the gold one. Manda Mishel Zahavim, but the one that says that you can use the gold one to crack nuts, but the spice hammer, that's more delicate and you don't use to crack nuts. So there's a machlekes over here, Rav Chia Barabba Rabbi Yechanan versus Rab Shaman Barabba, if you're allowed to use both a spice hammer and a gold hammer. According to Rab Chia Barabba, you're not allowed to use a spice hammer. Yeah. The doctors used to bang your knee. I don't know if they still do that. You'd go to the doctor, they would bang your knee and your knee would jump. What was that called? That hammer? What was that called? It had a name. You remember, Dr. Stein, what the name was? I can't hear you. They would check your reflex. Okay. Vesakush, Vesakarkar. These are two weaving instruments. Oh, there you go. Very nice. Do they still do that? They still check you like that? Yeah. Okay. It says over here that you can use these also to be able to take food. These are weaving instruments, but you can stick it into...
That was a reflex hammer. I couldn't find unmute.
Reflex hammer. So these tools for weaving, you're allowed to use to take berries with it. They're probably very fine tools, but you could stick it in. It would be like a toothpick. Now, even though these are usually used for a malacha that's asr, but you're allowed to use it for other things, as we've been learning. Taner Rabbanan, started in a brisa. Paga, the word paga has the word fig in it, but it's specifically an unripe fig. It's an unripe fig. Shetamna beteven. You put it into straw because you wanted it to ripen. Would be today equivalent to the putting it into a paper bag. It ripens because the ethylene, whatever it is, that makes the fruits ripen. So you put it in there. V'charara shetamna b'gechalim. Or if you put this sort of cake that gets baked on coals, you put it in there to finish. Now, we're not talking about that the coals are still burning. I don't think. Those two things are they're mukta. The straw is mukta, that you're putting the fig in, and the ash or the coals that you put the cake in is mukta. Imagula miktsasa, if when you put it in, it's still open on the top of the straw where you see the fig, and you can just take it out. As you pushed it into the straw, but it's still exposed on the top. So mutalatalta, then you can take it out. Vimlav, but if it's not exposed, you have to go start digging in there to get it out. So asalatalta, you can't take it out. Why? Because you're moving the muktzah. There's muktzah items that are on top. Now, when you do move the muktzah, though, you're not moving the muktzah directly. You're not taking it and moving it. This is called tiltul minatzad. You're moving the item, and other things are going to fall to the side. It's called tiltul minatzad. It's like an indirect movement. Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoya imer teichven bekusha bekarkave menars meleim. This is coming in. You can use these little toothpicks or whatever, these instruments that are used for other things. You're allowed to use them. You stick this in to the food that's hidden inside this, either the coals or the straw, and then you take it out and it falls on the side. Amar Rav Nachman halacha Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoya. Nachman says that's the halacha, that you're allowed to do that, even though it's not exposed on the top. So therefore, you're going to be moving the muktzah, things that are surrounding this food, but it's not a problem because it's tiltul minatzad. L'meimra, is this to say the Savra Nachman tiltul minatzad leishmi tiltul? This means that tiltul minatzad, tiltul is movement. Minatzad means from the side. Is not considered movement. It's not considered a moving muktzah. Rav Nachman has a clear statement. Hai pugla. Pugla means a tuber, a bulge of the radish. That's what it's called. The radish that's in the ground. It has the bulge. This radish, milmaila lamata shari. We learned once that they would put it back in the ground. I guess like just to keep it fresh. Otherwise, it would go bad. So they would uproot it and then they would put it in the ground, but it wasn't continuing to grow. It was just there. Somehow it would keep it fresher. They didn't have refrigerators. So if you put it in, you see the radish is wider on the top and it's thinner like a carrot. It's thin. It gets thinner like a cone. It gets thinner on the bottom. So if you put it in where it's wider on the top, then when you pull it out, you're not moving any of the dirt. So then that's mutter. Shari means it's mutter. But mimata l'mayla, if you put it in the opposite way, the thick side on the bottom, the thin point sticking up, then it's asr. Why? Because when you pull it up, you're going to be moving the dirt that's covering the cone. That's covering the thicker part, which is beneath. See, Rav Nachman holds tiltul minatzad is a problem. Why do you say before that tiltul minatzad isn't a problem? The halacha is like Rabbi Elazar today. So how did Rav Nachman yahi? Rav Nachman changed his mind from that statement. Really, if the radish is underneath, you're allowed to pull it up, even if the thicker part is below. That's probably the pshat in Me'ahi. Rav Nachman changed his mind from one of them. It's probably that one. Okay. Machet shal yad little bachulu. He said a needle you can use to take out a thorn, a splinter. Shalach le Rava Breder Rabba le Rabbi Yosef. Rava, Rabba's son, sends a message to Rabbi Yosef, a question. Rabbi Yosef was his father's friend. Rabba and Rabbi Yosef are friends. And this is Rava, Rabba's son. Rava was a student of Rabba, but this is a different Rava. This would be really confusing. He has a son and a student, the same name. Yilamdenu Rabbein. Anyway, he's sending a message to Rabbi Yosef. He says, teach us our rabbi. Machat shenitul charara ay uktzah mahu. Now, charara we just had before, that meant this cake. Here it doesn't mean that. Here charara means the eye. Chor shalah. Charara is the eye of the needle. You have a needle that the eye fell off. It has no function anymore, other than if you want to take out a thorn. But for sewing, it's really lost its function. Or maybe its point fell off. Now it really doesn't have a function. So mahu, what's the din with it? And he's asking if you're allowed to use it to take out a thorn. So Amalei Tanisua, we have a Mishnah. Machat shel yad little basakaitz. You're allowed to use these needles to take out a thorn. Does the thorn really care if there's an eye at the back of the needle? To take out the thorn, it still has its function. So you're allowed to use it on Shabbos. Even though it's a broken needle, you're allowed to use it to take out the thorn. Esvei, this is not so simple. As you can imagine, if you have a needle that's metal, it becomes tamei. If the eye comes off, breaks, the needle breaks, or the point comes off, you thought it's tamei. Now it's not tamei anymore because it's not a keli. If it becomes tar, it's not a keli. How can you move something on Shabbos that's not a keli? Amar Abaya. Abaya responds to that question. I guess it was Rava that was asking it. It's a different Rava Breder Rava. Abaya responds, Tuma a Shabbos karamas. This is really throwing me off, Rava Breder Rava. Because every conversation Abaya has with Rava is now I have to worry about if it's the other Rava. Something's interesting about that.
Maybe Rabbi is explaining it after he became the Rosh Hashiva.
No, my concern was that now I don't know who Rava is. Every time it says Rava, if Rava is a student of Rabba, and now I have a Rava Breder Rabba.
Didn't they both grow up by Rabba?
Yeah, Rava and Abaya grew up. Abaya definitely grew up by Rabba, and Rava was a student of Rabba when he was young. That we know, that we had in brachas. But this is I don't remember a Rava Breder Rabba before. That's what's throwing me off. Just that phrase that he's a son of.
You could do it. You got it. Just keep thinking.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Anyway, here's the question. He said that it's not a keli. How are you allowed to use it? So Abaye responds, Tuma Shabbos Karamis. You're asking a question from Hilchos Tuma to Masechta Shabbos. Tuma, when it comes to impurity, Klei Maisa Binan, it has to be a vessel that's functioning. But Linyan Shabbos, Midi the Chazi Binan, on Shabbos it doesn't need to be a vessel, it needs to be able to be usable. And I can use it. It doesn't need to be a vessel. Whatever you can use it for, if you can use it for something that's mutter, then it's fine. In this it could be used to take out a thorn. So when it comes to Tumah, it has to have its original function still there. So therefore, it doesn't have its original function because I can't put the thread through it. So that becomes tar. But on Shabbos, I'm not using it for its original function. I'm using it for a different function. And if I can use it for a different function, it's allowed. Okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, Man de kamaisiv, shaper kamaisiv. The one that asked the question, you see that back to the other Rava. The one that asked the question, asked a good question. Abaye's answer is not a good answer. Midulin in Tumah lav manahu, in Shabbos nami lav manahu. He says, no, if it's not a keli, it's not a keli. It's not a keli for Tumah, it's not a keli for Shabbos. Where says, 1 second. I'm going to ask a question now on Rava. Meisvei. Machat bein nekuva bein shein nekuva matal taltal b'Shabbos v'yom nekuva elin tum bilvad. Such a strong question. So it's so clear. It says that a needle, that whether it has the eye or it doesn't have the eye, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. Why? Whatever, for taking out the thorns. So what is this concept of an eye in the needle? That's only for Tumah. Very clear that there's a difference between Tumah and Shabbos. What's Rava saying? That no, if it's not a keli for Tumah, it's not a keli for Shabbos. You have a brisa clearly that says that there's a difference there. So Tirgama Abaye aliba de Rava. This happens sometimes, that the other Amira says, it's actually not such a good question because I can explain it for the other side. Abaye says I can answer. When I had this Gemara in Eily Metzias in Yesh Lamidas, there was one of these Tirgama Abaye aliba de Rava that my teacher told me, I guess it was 5th grade. They said, they do this because they're looking for the truth. It's not personal. They're going to tell you that even though this is what I hold, but the truth is that this is not a real proof. So he says that begolmi askinan. Over there it's talking about you're making it now into a utensil. Zimnin de mimlach alayamash mana. You're making a needle. You didn't get the eye yet. But you may say, you know what? I don't need the eye. I need it for to take out a thorn. So it becomes a vessel. But if you made it into a needle already, and then it broke. So Adam Zarka Lebein Grutes, you throw it to the scrap metal. So what would mean, well, this would mean is that when it's said that there's a difference between Shabbos and Tumah, that's when you're making it. But when Rava was correct, is that if it's not considered a vessel for Tumah, it's not considered a vessel for Shabbos, that's when it broke. When it broke, it becomes tar, it becomes a not vessel, it becomes a worthless item. But while you're making it, you can still say, no, this is going to be a different usage. Okay, now we say asuba yenuka. Let's take a little shift over here. This is when a baby's born, they straighten out the joints, the limbs, to make the legs straight, the arms straight. They straighten out the body. Are you allowed to do this on Shabbos? Rav Nachman Aser of Sheshes Shari. Rav Nachman says it's Aser and Oyser. Rav Sheshes says it's Mutter. You can remember that because the shin of Rav Sheshes goes with Shari. 2 shins. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, how do I know that it's Aser? The Tanan, I have a Mishnah that says, Ein Oysin, which on the page. I picked the Vazin b'Shabbos. Now, this is, we're discussing here, it's borderline medicine, but it's not actually medicine. Here, a person wants to eat more So he makes himself throw up. He makes himself vomit. So it's not medicine. It says he's not allowed to do this on Shabbos. What's the problem? It's called Masakin Gavra. He's fixing himself. He's doing some trick to be able to eat more. If you're not allowed to do that, you're not allowed to fix your body, your stomach to be able to eat more, then you shouldn't be allowed to straighten the limbs either. Rav Sheshes responds, Hasam lavorche, hachu orche. Look, you're allowed to eat. So you're making the bones straight. This is totally normal. What you were doing over there was abnormal. You're making yourself throw up to be able to eat more. That you're not allowed to do. But this is just making the body straight, which is perfectly normal. I'll prove it to you. You're allowed to take out a thorn. You're allowed to take out a thorn. That's also fixing the person. You're going to say you can't take out thorns. Rabbi Nachman responds, Hasam paket, hachalei paket. Over there, the thorn was just placed inside the body. It was just being held there. So taking it out is not fixing the body. However, here you're putting the body into place. That's mamish fixing the body. And that's a problem on Shabbos. It's Masakin Gavra. Okay, like setting the bones into their place. Okay, the Mishnah says like this. Kana shel zaysim. They would turn over they would let the olives sit so that something happens in them that the oil would come out very easily. So there was a stick that was used to turn over the olives to see if they're ready. So if there's a knot at the end of the stick, then it's mekabel tumah. Then the stick is considered more than just a stick, and it's actually considered a vessel, and it's mekabel tumah. If it doesn't have that knot at the end, I think that the knot would allow it to be like a spoon, that it could actually lift it up. The olive, it would turn over like a single olive or something. And the knot would do something that would turn it into a vessel. And if not, if it doesn't have that knot, then it's not mekabel tumah. Either way, you can move the stick on Shabbos.
Are we done?
Sorry? No.
Oh, okay,
do you want to say something?
No, it just got quiet for 3 seconds.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. No, don't be sorry. Good, breathe.
No thinking.
breathe.
Okay.
Breathe. You got this. I love this. Oh my God. Sorry, I get excited. Okay, bye. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I skipped the Gemara. Gemara says, Amai pshutikli yetzu. Why does it become a kabel tumah? It's just a straight stick. Even though it could be a kana, which is a reed is hollow, but it's still considered a straight stick because it doesn't hold it. It's not a receptacle. So, the Gemara says, "My timer, what's the reason why it becomes mekabel tumah? Because it's similar to a sack, which that means it becomes a receptacle. And take a look. When he turns over the olives, he's able to look at the bottom of this reed and see that there's a little bit of oil that's contained over there. It means that somehow this knot makes it that it's able to collect the oil in that little spot, whatever it is. I don't know, but somehow this makes it into receptacle. You could see now that the olives are ready to be pressed. Okay, now we have another Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Mikol HaKelim Nitalim Chutz Min HaMeser HaGadol V'Yased Shel Machresha. All vessels are permissible to move on Shabbos. They're not muktzah, except for two. Except for a large saw and the blade of the plow. Okay. Amar Rav Nachman. Nachman says, "Hay uchla de katzri ki yased shel machresha damya." It's a very interesting utensil here. This uchla de katzri is like a sprinkler. Two possibilities, Rashi says, how it's used. It's a plate or a board that has a bunch of holes in it. Now, either they would pour water on top, and when they would try to, with the laundry person, the launderer, would wash the clothes, he would let it get wet through the water dripping over it. It would need to moisten it for whatever it was going to scrub it. The water would drip down through those holes. Other possibility is that they would put incense beneath the clothing. They'd put the clothing on top of this board, and the incense would go through those holes, and it would make the clothing smell nice. But he says this is like the yased shel machresha, the yated of the plow, and what's the problem with that blade of the plow? That blade is, you're very careful with it. That's the whole tool. You don't use it for anything else. So here also, these holes, the sprinkler of the launderer is not used for anything else, and therefore it's like set aside. It's set aside in your mind for Shabbos. Amar Abaya, chorva de ushkefi, the knife of a shoemaker, sakina dashkafta, and the knife of the butcher, v'chatzina denagri. This is a draw knife of a carpenter, more delicate than just a regular saw. All of those ki yased shel machresha dami, that is like the yased of the machresha, like the blade of the plow, which you set it aside, you don't use it for anything else, and therefore on Shabbos it's muktzah. So things that are designated for only that use are muktzah on Shabbos. Taner Rabbanan. Originally they said shleisha kelim nitalim b'Shabbos. People think that as we go on, we get more strict. Orthodoxy gets more and more chumrus and all of that. Yes, that's true, but there's also, it's not 100% true, as you'll see over here. It's not 100% true. Originally, they said 3 utensils you're allowed to use on Shabbos. You follow? You can't use anything on Shabbos. You have to walk around like you can't touch anything on Shabbos. No, only 3 things you can use. What were those things? You're allowed to use a knife to cut the figs, the dried figs. You couldn't get it off. You're allowed to use that knife. Zuama listeron shel kedera. Sounds like Listerine. This is some sort of ladle that was used to cleaning the pot. The sakin katana shel gabi shulchan, and a knife that's for the table, a table knife. Those are the 3 utensils you can use. It doesn't say about a fork, a spoon. What would you use? Does it mean you couldn't use a plate? Okay, whatever the case is, hitiru. They then made more things permissible. V'chazru v'hitiru, and they returned and they made more things permissible. V'chazru v'hitiru, they returned and made more things permissible. Ad shamru kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbos. So they said any utensil you can move on Shabbos, chutz min ha-mesar gadol v'yased shel machresha, except for 2. We switched the whole thing around. It's not that everything is asur except what's permitted. No, everything is permitted except for 2 things that are asur. Ma hitiru v'chazru v'hitiru v'chazru v'hitiru. What is this? That they permitted, and then they permitted again, and they permitted again. We're going to have over here Machlekes Abaye and Rava. Let's go a little further. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, "Hitiru davar shemalachta lehetel letzerich gufay." Originally they said, well, something that's heter, a spoon, you want to eat soup, you're allowed to use it to eat soup. Chazer hitiru davar shemalachta lehetel letzerich mekaymai. Then they said, a spoon, you're allowed to use it. You're allowed to move it, even if you don't need to use it, even if it's in the wrong place. Originally, you're allowed to move it because you wanted to use it. Then they said you're even allowed to move it just because you need that place. Then they said you're even allowed to move a hammer. Only if you want to use it. You want to use it to crack a nut? Fine, but you're not allowed to move it because it happens to be on the chair and you want to sit there. This was only still things that could be moved with one hand, or you can move it with one hand, with two hands, no. You can move it with two hands as well. Okay, comes out according to Abaya, is that a keli shemalachta le'isser, you're only allowed to move l'tzairech gufay. Only a hammer, you're only allowed to move to crack a nut. You can't move it because you need the place. Amle Rava says mechti. Hetiru ktani, they said they permitted. What's the difference? If they allowed to be moved, why is there a difference if you want to use it for permitted use, or if you want to sit on the chair, you need its place? Rava learns it's different. They allowed things that are permissible, a spoon, in one go, whether you need to use the spoon or whether you need the place that the spoon is on. Then they said, you know what? I'm allowed to move the spoon not because I need to sit on that chair. I'm allowed to move the spoon because it happens to be in the rain or in the sun, and I don't want it to get ruined. I'm not moving it because of me. I'm moving it because of it. I'm protecting it. Michamal itself, from the sun to the shade, I can move it. But then they said, what about a hammer? Rava says they allowed you to move a hammer because you want to use it to crack a nut, and you want to use it and because it's on your chair. But they still said that you can't move a hammer because it's in the sun and it's going to get ruined. You can't move it. You can't move it for it. You can move it only for you. But they said only things that are small enough that one person can move. You're allowed to move even things that are movable only by two people. Let me go just another 2 lines so we can finish by Amar Abchanina. Esvei Abaya. Abaya has a question. According to Rava, you're not allowed to. According to Abaya, you're not allowed to move things. Keli shemalachta le'isser, a hammer, because you need the place. Abaya has a question to Rava. According to Rava, you're allowed to move it. Meducha. We had this before. If there's a grinder, a mortar and pestle, if the garlic is in it, you're allowed to move it because the garlic is in it. But if not, you're not allowed to move it. 1 second. It says, according to me, it makes sense. Why you're not allowed to move it? Because I'm not moving it to grind. I'm moving it because it's in the place that I need to sit on. But you're not allowed to move it, because Abaya holds you're only allowed to move it for its own, to use it for l'tzarech het. I'm not using l'tzarech het. I'm moving it for the place. Because according to Abaya, there's a reason here why it shouldn't be moved, and that is it's that if it's l'tzarech mekaimai, because I need the place that it's on. Rava responds, it's not a problem. It says, I also have a reason why you shouldn't be allowed to move it. It's because you're trying to protect it. That you're not allowed to do. Same question again. Once the meat was cut on that pestle, you're not allowed to move it. According to Abaya, I understand why you're not allowed to move it, because it's l'tzarech mekaimai. But according to Rava, why you're not allowed to move it? L'tzarech mekaimai is mutter. Rava responds, hachanami mechamal etzel. It's talking about, are you allowed to move it from the sun to the shade? That you're not allowed to do. Okay, let's leave it over here.